Hello there.
Hi, everybody.
It's Charlie and Linda. We're back. And today we're going to be talking about, well, the same thing that everybody in the world is talking about right now. But we're also going to talk about it in the context of relationships. The title that we came up with for this talk, and we came up with it a few weeks ago. So we're still going to adhere to the theme, but it's going to be more inclusive than we originally had planned. The title is Adults Get to Have Timeouts Too. And we had originally planned and continued, we still plan to talk about this in the context of managing differences and being effective in creating spaces that are sometimes necessary in order to process information when there's tensions or any high level concerns that are present. So those of us who are parents may have, hopefully have experienced using the tool of a timeout when things get heated or at an impasse, or you happen to have a child who is in that stage of not wanting to cooperate with everything that you say, which occurs sometime between the ages of 2 and 35. So we're going to talk about that in terms of relationships, but also particularly in terms of the current coronavirus situation, which is challenging all of us to really take a deeper cut at the whole question of how do I deal with this?
So, I want to tell you a little story about when our children were small. My daughter Sarah had a bad habit of whining for a while when she was about 5. And I went to the Montessori kindergarten where she was enrolled for a parent-teacher conference. And I said to the teacher, "How do you handle it when Sarah whines?" And she said, "Sarah never whines here." And I realized that she was saving all of her whining for me, that she knew where she could get away with it and where she couldn't.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew she had the capacity to stop whining if she chose to, but she was indulging with it with me. So I went right home and I got on my phone to my friend Anne, who's a teacher, and I said, "My daughter Sarah, who's 5, is whining at home with me and driving me out of my mind, but she doesn't whine when she's at school." I just came back from the teacher conference. Anne said, "Well, how do you handle it when she whines?" And I said, "I tell her firmly, I don't like it. It upsets me. That if you want your friends to enjoy you and have good relationships with family and friends, you have to stop the whining." And I time her out for 5 minutes in her bedroom. She said, "That's the problem. She's got a lot of toys in her bedroom. She goes in there and she plays, and it's not even deprivation for her. Put her in the bathroom." So the next time she whined, I was ready, and I put her in the bathroom. I think it only took once or twice, maybe 3 times at the most, for 5 minutes each, and she stopped and she never whined again. I think when she wasn't distracted by her toys, that she really thought about what I had said to her, about how it upset me, and how if she wanted the other children to like her and her brothers to like her and her family and friends, that she had to get a grip on her whining. And she did. She had a life-changing moment, and I had a life-changing moment. I had timed out my boys too, who were older, and they got the message being in their room, but for whatever reasons they didn't. My boys didn't whine. It was only Sarah who was the whiner for
Her
a short
husband
while.
occasionally whined, but not too often.
So I really saw how valuable timeouts are for me to use with my kids. But I also saw that timeouts are really helpful for adults. One time, one of my boys said to me when he was small, I think that children ought to be able to send their parents to their room. And he was right, because sometimes we as adults get really flooded with feelings and we're not thinking straight and we say things we don't mean. And sometimes we make threats and ultimatums and get a harsh tone in our voice or raise our voice. And we need a timeout, sometimes just a few minutes, to pause and reflect. Now, the coronavirus is giving us a big timeout. And it depends on how we use it. If we can really mine it for the gold and the opportunity that's in it by asking the right questions. Do I want to have a reset in my life in a month or two when this passes? Do I want to make some changes about the way I'm living? Am I working too much? Am I working too little? Am I too obsessed with material things? Do I need to focus more on my spiritual life? Am I not giving time and attention to have quality connections with the people that are most important to me? Am I procrastinating about things? Because everybody's got death on their mind these days. And so we're in the state of awareness that we don't have forever to do what we want to do with our wild and precious life. And so I think if we take this forced time out and use it to best advantage, when the crisis passes, as it will, it's only a matter of time, it's nerve-wracking to not know how long a period of time, but it is going to pass. Things are going to settle down. And we don't have to go back to the normal that was before the crisis. We can use this to strategize and visualize the changes that we want to make in our life to make our life really work for us.
So if you were tuning in to last Thursday's talk, you probably heard us say something about the opportunities that are available in this crisis. There's danger in it and there's opportunities too. And we want to kind of not clarify, because I think we did clarify it last week, but we want to really emphasize that when we talk about the possibilities of really getting some perspective and learning and taking advantage of some of the opportunities to expand our horizons here, we're by no means implying that, oh, this is a wonderful thing, this coronavirus, and it gives us a chance to do all of these things that we can't do when we're so busy living our structured lives. No, we're not saying that at all. This is a serious worldwide global issue that is affecting pretty much directly or indirectly every person on the planet. So no, we're not saying, oh, cheer up and be happy about all this. What we're saying is that there are aspects of this that can produce some important learning, not just in terms of dealing with the immediacy of the issues, the financial issues, the relationship issues, the concerns of our lives that are being threatened. And we're not suggesting that doesn't exist. It does exist. But what we are noticing with a lot of the people that we're hearing from, and we're hearing from a lot of people who are emailing us or calling with concerns and questions and, wanting some support, some input, some clarity about things. One of the things that we're hearing is that they just don't really know how to deal with this, particularly in terms of the challenges that are coming up in their relationships. And so one of the things that we've noticed is that because so many of us are not adequately skilled or experienced in effective conflict management and resolution, one of the strategies that a lot of us use is to create some distance between ourselves and our partner, to avoid having to spend too much time with them. And now we're in a position, oddly enough, where we are experiencing a form of enforced intimacy, where there isn't any place to go, where we are taking a huge time out on a global level, not just from one issue, not just from one aspect of our lives, but from basically the structure of our lives as we have known it, that we really are entering into a new world, or some people say a new normal, which is going to require us to learn and some new skills and to upgrade our level of skill in terms of the challenges that we're going to have to face by having one relationship. If we live with another person, if we have a committed partnership with a live-in partner, in terms of having this no escape. Fortunately, we have a space, most of us anyway, hopefully, bigger than a bathroom to take our time out in. And we have more distractions than there are in the bathroom. But we're facing that on the one hand. But on the other hand, there's this enforced separateness, this social distancing. So we don't have access to a lot of the other pathways, other relationships, other networks, other people that we generally can get those social needs met through. Mm-hmm. So, we really are challenged to be able to work on both sides of that equation and deal with the distancing that we have always had access to other people. And now to deal with this enforced intimacy that we may not be prepared to all of a sudden, and it has been suddenly, in case you hadn't noticed that this change is happening, all of a sudden really have to learn how to deal with the inevitable differences that are not only going to come up, but they're going to be amplified and aggravated by the level of stress that so many of us are experiencing.
So on top of not having the normal escapes of being able to go to work, go to the gym, go to the movies, go to the restaurant, go to the bar room, drop by our friend's house, and that we're in the pressure cooker at home, and the normal differences that we have to field all the time. On top of that, there is usually one in the pair who's more conservative, who just wants to shelter in place. The governor said we're all supposed to shelter in place. And another one may be more liberal, that they're willing to go to the supermarket and one person doesn't want to go to the supermarket. And they're willing to go to the bank and the post office, and the other person says, I think we should just stay inside. And one person says, I want to continue taking care of the grandkids. I want to have them over, or want to take care of them over there. And the other one says, I think that's too risky. They've been with their friends and I don't want to do it. And so the normal differences are there. And then on top of that, there's this one that feels like and could actually be life-threatening. So there's more at stake. So the intensity of the emotion can get so strong that we're not really listening to the other person's point of view with any openness and respect. We're just trying to shove our view onto them. This is when the timeouts are really needed.
Yeah.
To calm ourselves down, to take a few breaths, to bring our blood pressure and our heart rate down, to re-engage the neocortex where creative options are available to us, not the reptilian brain that's at the back of the brainstem that only knows freeze, fight, or flight. And if we ever needed a time where we could pause and reflect, it's now, because the stress is on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we really want to encourage you to take advantage of this tool called a timeout and to utilize it with discretion. I don't mean that whenever there's a difference of opinion that one of you calls a timeout. I mean, like, for example, Linda and I have used timeouts for years in our relationship. We don't use them very often because we don't need to at this point. But particularly in the early stages of our learning about developing some of these negotiation skills, and they are negotiation skills. People who are in relationship need to negotiate just like anybody who is on the other side of an equation with somebody else needs to negotiate to see if they can come to some place of agreement where there's some common ground that they have. And a timeout is something that can be very, very useful if it's used discriminately. And it's only used when there's an obvious difference that is moving into the stage, the danger zone. And you know what I mean by that. I mean that.
Flooded with feeling.
That's right. That's right. The neocortex is taking a vacation and the reptilian brain is running the show. And, you know, the reptilian brain is not really good about being very soft and squishy and nice and happy. And
it's not self-disciplined.
No, it indulges its desires.
It's primitive.
Yeah, there's a reason why they call it primitive and reptilian. So when that happens with one of us in a relationship, so going back to the example that I was using about us, we created an agreement in which when either person feels like that's happening and they feel like they can no longer participate, or that the other person is not participating in a way that is promoting some degree of understanding, where there's so much anger and fear and reactivity and defensiveness that, you know, you can get to a point, and many people do, where to continue to try to resolve the differences is only making it worse. And so when that becomes apparent that, hey, man, we're both making our best effort here, and this thing is not going anywhere. In fact, it's getting worse. You know, it's time for a timeout. Our agreement has been that when either one of us feels that we're getting to that point, that we don't negotiate. That's one thing we don't negotiate.
No questions
We don't
asked.
discuss whether or not we want to do it. We don't need agreement about that because we've already got agreement.
Mm-hmm.
And the agreement is that when one of us gets there, then they have the authority to call that off with a couple of conditions.
Yeah.
Just a couple of conditions. First of all, there's got to be an outer verbal, it's not a request, but it's a statement that we need to take a time out now. I need to take a time out. So that's a given that is going to happen. What's implied, because we've discussed this condition too, in the timeout, is that number one, there will be a time in. That we have to agree on. We have to agree about when we're going to re-engage.
I'm going, but I'm coming back. It's a very important part of how we take our leave, because you can take a time out and it will not be constructive if you imply you're impossible to deal with, so I have to get rid of you, and you leave them hanging. They can experience that as punishing, and it may be punishing.
Yeah, and for a lot of people, it's going to activate their abandonment stuff.
So to take the time out with respect, that means we don't stomp off, and if we leave the room, we don't slam the door.
Yeah.
And what we do in the timeout time is we're deliberately, intentionally, in a committed fashion, calming ourselves down, not building our defense so we can go back and get them in the next round. That we're really in good faith,
yeah,
preparing to go back with an intention to learn and have some kind of a constructive dialogue.
absolutely. So how we spend the timeout is as important as the timeout itself. It is not a timeout if there's a separation and one or both people spend that time thinking about how angry they are and why they're so angry, and nursing and feeding their judgments about the other person. That is not going to promote a very high likelihood of a reunion in which there is more mutual understanding and acceptance. That's what we're looking for. Is, okay, we'll take this time out because where we are now is clearly not taking us to the place we want to get to. So if we don't intentionally, consciously choose to use that time to look within ourselves at some very important questions, then when we do come back together again, we're going to just pick up where we left off. So what are some of the questions that you would encourage our viewers to consider during the timeout?
In the coronavirus timeout?
Well,
or are you talking about the microcosm or the macrocosm?
I'm talking about the microcosm of the argument, and then we can get into...
What do I have to do with this? What is my responsibility? How might I participate differently? What was my way of being? What did I say or not say or do or not say that might have provoked them such that they were so upset? So if we can be highly responsible about what we're doing in our timeout, the chances of a successful reunion when we come back, and not to take too long to do this. Even a half an hour can feel long to some people, or an hour. Maximum is 24 hours. Sometimes the issue's so big that we need a long time to calm down. The blurters need to take longer to calm down. The people who are stuffers need to re-engage sooner. So it's risky on both sides. The issue, if we let it go sub rosa, under the table, can slip away where we don't really deal with it effectively. It'll come back to haunt us. And those people who blurt and don't take the contemplative time to focus on what it is that they really need and what it is they really need to hear, what it is they need to learn, they're ripping themselves off too. But I want to take it from the microcosm to the macrocosm.
Sure, go for it.
So the same rules apply in the argument. If you have a bad argument with your partner or anybody who's dear to you and it's disruptive to your well-being, there's a big opportunity for learning in there. It's a little crisis. Feels like a big crisis at the time when we're having the argument, but it's a little crisis as crises go. We're in a big crisis. When there's this big a crisis, the opportunity is huge. And even in the little crises of our arguments, the opportunity for learning is huge, to become more of who we are in the little crisis and now in the big crisis. Big opportunity. We know somebody named David. He lives in Marin County. He's got a t-shirt that has a slogan on it that I adore. It says, "Give chaos a chance." Like give peace a chance, give chaos a chance. For somebody who is down and have a lot of control, this was a mantra for me for a long time about how to allow a very chaotic situation. This is bigger than we can tack down. Give it a chance because there's an opportunity for creating a life that was different from before. Mm-hmm. Many of us are going to make life-changing turns from this crisis. because we will use the weeks or the months that we are quarantined and sequestered at home and sheltered in place, that contemplative time to really see how we've been living, see how we've been conducting our relationships, asking the profound, deep questions, having some meaningful conversations with the people that we live with and the people that we're closest to. And this could be an up level in our life like none we've ever had before, or similar to some of the big epiphanies that have been life-changing from crises that we've had previous to now. I just don't like waste, so I want everybody to use the opportunity that's in this.
So there's another level that I want to refer to before we finish up here. Another level of timeout. So there's the timeouts that we need to take into personally when the stress and the tension of our anxiety gets to us. That's going to be more likely to arise and possibly to higher levels during this time. And then there's the time out from our ordinary, normal routines that are totally interrupted for we don't know how long. But the third time out that I want to make reference to is to take a time out from the obsessiveness that so many of us are falling into, out of our worry and fear and anxiety and concern about this. There's so many unanswered questions. There's so much more that is unknown than is known. And when we're in that state of not knowing, it provokes a lot of anxiety that can keep us up at night, that can cause obsessive thinking, that can prevent us from paying attention to the other aspects of our life that need attention and care. So I want to encourage all of you, all of us, to be responsible about giving ourselves required time outs from the obsessive focus on thinking about this situation that we're in. And what that means is, because you're probably never going to get what you feel like is sufficient information that will allay the anxiety, at least not for a while. Mm-hmm. It may be necessary to actually have an agreement with yourself of having time that you put aside, whether it's scheduled time or whether it's just time that you become aware, I need a break from this, from the news. I need a break from all of my obsessive thinking. Sometimes we need distractions. Distractions can be incredibly helpful to our emotional and mental health sometimes.
While we're staying safe.
Yeah.
Not to do anything high risk. Yeah. Could you hand me that, because I want to tell them the topic for next week?
Yeah. So just let me say a little bit more here, and then I'll be done. I just want to underscore how important this can be. And it doesn't have to be a long time out, but we need a break. We need a breather. There's a point of diminishing returns about us worrying and thinking and planning, particularly when we don't know what to expect. So do all those things. Do the planning, get the information, listen to the news, but put limits on it so that it doesn't get to the stage of being an unhealthy obsession.
That's right.
Then that's very diminishing returns.
Okay, right on. In the spirit of planning but not getting attached to the plan, we have a topic for next week's Facebook Live presentation called Sympathetic Joy. But we're holding it lightly depending on what's going on with the coronavirus epidemic, we may change the topic. So we're not sure about next week.
Just like everything else, all the plans are tentative, and what God does when he hears us making plans. She laughs.
All right. So we sent out a newsletter yesterday. If any of you that watch us through Facebook Live aren't on our email list, we send out a newsletter that's a booster shot of inspiration. And one of the things that we said in the newsletter yesterday is, with this found time, since we can't go to the gym and the movies and the things that we normally do, and we're trying to prioritize what would be the best use of our time now that things are so changed, you might want to go and see one of the 100 YouTube videos or the Facebook Live videos and take a free course with Charlie and Linda Bloom about enhancing your relationships. So if that inspires you and that moves you, have at 'em. And we'll see you next week. And be sure and tell your friends about our presentation today if you think it will be helpful to you. And we're wishing you all the best. Be safe.